Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this developing news video. I am Andy Pollack. We're going to get into the developing news story from the MTA from earlier this morning that MTA Chairman Pat Foye is resigning to take a new job in the construction field. The official word from multiple sources, first broke by the Wall Street Journal earlier this morning, is that Sarah Feinberg is about to make history. If all goes well, she will become the first chairwoman of the MTA. However, she will not be named CEO. She will only be named president and chairwoman. There will be somebody else who will run the day-to-day operations of the MTA, and we'll get into that from this daily news article. So, as you can see here, headline reads from the Daily News: New York City Transit Chief Sarah Feinberg to become MTA Chairwoman. First time that's ever happened in the agency's history, but will not run the agency day to day. So, that's very important to bring up. So I'll zoom in so you all can see this, because this is something I want you all to take a look at very carefully here. Well, I'll make the text a little bit bigger. So it says here, Interim Transit President Sarah Feinberg is set to become the MTA's chairwoman in a new role that will be split off from the CEO position. Janno Liber, the MTA's Chief Development Officer, who also is the chairman of the Capital Project Oversight Committee, and also saw the reconstruction of the Freedom Tower after 9/11, will take over as the agency's chief executive. The resigning MTA chairman Pat Foye, who was appointed to this post in 2019, is slated to become the head of the Empire State Development Corporation. Foye previously served as executive director of the Port Authority. During his time at the MTA, he saw a mandated reorganization of the agency that slashed thousands of jobs and sparked the February 2020 resignation of New York City Transit President Andy Byford. Of course, as you know, Andy Byford left to become a top executive at Transport for London last year. Alright, so I just want to mention that this article may not bring this up, but the most important thing that Pat Foye did as chairman of the MTA was pass the largest capital budget in its history. If it weren't for Pat Foye, in a sense, we would have never had all these capital projects gone through. So, in a way, you got to thank him for that regard. But there was other controversies with Pat Foye, including a heated 2019 board meeting back in October where Pat Foye made some hurtful remarks against the Italian community, which, of course, very hurtful to the union members of TWU Local 100, so there was controversy about that. And that was one of the notable controversies as Pat Foye is chairman of the MTA. So, we'll move on to the next point about Sarah Feinberg. Now again, this is very historic because there's never been a chairwoman of the MTA. It's never happened before. This would be the first time that this would happen in the agency's history. But instead of seeing the day-to-day operations in CEO and chair roles, she will be in a reduced capacity as the person who will just organize the meetings and call them to orders. And of course, Sarah also will be approving contracts, fair policies, and the $17 billion operating budget for the year-to-year cost. Janno Liber's job will efficiently run the MTA's day-to-day operations. So he'll be the one monitoring everything. I guess he'll be the one talking to the media more often than Sarah will, I guess. But we'll see how that goes down the line. Now, a couple of things that this new duo is going to have to figure out is that, number one, who is going to be the president of New York City Transit? As you know, Sarah took over that role literally 2 days before the COVID-19 pandemic started. 2 days before it started. So who's going to be president? And then number two, there was a discussion by resigning Chairman Pat Foye regarding fare hikes. Now, as you know, earlier this year, the tolls on the bridges and tunnels went up. So the only other issue that's going to have to be addressed is the fare hikes. Are they going to go up on the Long Island Railroad, Metro North, and New York City Transit? That is the next question that has to be figured out. I know that's still on the table for this year. So that's going to have to be discussed. So Governor Andrew Cuomo sent a bill to the New York State Legislature last night to bifurcate the role, according to the Wall Street Journal, which first reported the story of the MTA reshuffling. The history involving Sarah Feinberg: she was appointed by the governor back in 2019 and was brought on as New York City Transit president in an interim role after Andy Byford resigned in February of 2020. She said at the time the job was not something I can do in the long term, and said her priority was to find a permanent replacement. But then COVID hit, and she spent the following 16 months overseeing a sub-agency that lost more than 100 plus workers due to COVID-19. She's also executed the first ever overnight closure of the subway system, marking the first time in its 116-year histories that New Yorkers did not have subways around the clock. Before her board appointment, Feinberg was also considered by Cuomo and other board members for the chair position in a role that would also be split off from the CEO, according to sources with knowledge of the negotiations at the time. Feinberg and Cuomo in 2019 deliberating appointing the governor's former aide and MTA board member Larry Shorts, who also is the chairman of the Finance Committee, as CEO, had the legislator pass legislation to split the role. So there was a point where Larry Shorts was actually considered. So that's very interesting. The splitting of the roles, as well as the appointments of Feinberg and Liber, must be appointed by the legislator before the year's legislative session ends on Thursday. If everything is approved, the pair will take up their new roles beginning on July 30th. Thus meaning, if all goes well this summer, and it looks like it could, and if we are back to in-person meetings in the fall, it sounds like we will see Madam Chairwoman Sarah Feinberg, which would be the first time it's ever happened. Also, bringing up something important, the legislator also has to approve a board member. Now that Pat Foye is resigning, that leaves a vacancy on the MTA board. I can confirm from an independent source that the chairman of the Long Island Railroad Commuter Council, Gerard Bringman, so remember that name, Gerard Bringman, is also being considered for an MTA board nomination. So the state senate has his name up, they just have to approve it, and there could be a chance that sometime later this month or in July we will see all three chairmen of their respective commuter councils: Andrew Albert, who represents New York City Transit, Randy Glucksman, who represents Metro North, and Gerard Bringman, who would represent the Long Island Railroad, all serve a role on the MTA board. So, just want to bring that up because, again, if it's not in the Wall Street Journal, I can independently confirm this information. I have it from an independent source. I'm not going to say who it is, but it is confirmed. So let's move on back to the news about Sarah Feinberg. Feinberg's tenure running New York City Transit and at the first MTA board is focused around crime. She reportedly called for cops to deploy hundreds more NYPD officers to the subways, and in 2019 pushed the MTA board to approve the hiring of 500 extra police officers in a sharp split with the NYPD's Transit Bureau. Liber's work at the MTA includes expediting repairs to the L train's East River Tunnel. He and his team quickly reconstructed the scope of the project to avoid a shutdown of the tube after Cuomo made a surprise announcement in 2019, back in January, that a full 15-month closure would not be necessary. So now Janno Liber will be tasked with revitalizing the $51.5 billion 2020-2024 capital plan which was again approved by Chairman Pat Foye in 2019 after it was put on hold by the pandemic. Liber said in 2019 that the projects in the plan would make the city's mass transit more reliable and more accessible to disabled riders. So I just want to bring up the fact that, yes, Janno is going to have to do more work now. He's going to have to focus on continuing the success of the elevator program that Andy Byford fully supported at his time as New York City Transit President. He's also going to have to continue to make sure that the third track project is going to be done. It looks like it'll be done on time by next year. The third track project for the main line of the Long Island Railroad that's supposed to be between New Hyde Park and Hicksville. So we know this weekend, I'll just bring it up, that there is going to be a mainline shutdown. They're going to remove the last grade crossing on the Long Island Railroad as part of that project at North 12th Street in New Hyde Park. So that's very important to bring up. And more importantly now, more than ever, Janno's going to have to keep his main priority focus on getting the East Side Access project done at Grand Central Terminal. So a lot of work is going to have to be done in terms of, well, what's going to happen if, he feels overwhelmed, he just can't take it anymore, CEO. They're going to have to put somebody else in. I don't want to speculate names, but I think I could know somebody who might be able to maybe take over the CEO role. I'll just give you a hint. He used to be the former Bronx Borough president and actually ran for mayor once. So if you know who this person is, then you might have added 2 + 2 and 4. Because this person has been in an interim role before. And this was a person who actually served after Joe Lhota resigned his second time as chairman. So, once again, just to recap the news, Sarah Feinberg is going to make history if confirmed by the New York State Senate. She will become the first MTA chairwoman. However, she will not run the day-to-day operations, as Janno Liber will be named Chief Executive Officer of the MTA. And if all goes well, it sounds like in July it could be Pat Foye's last meeting as chairman of the MTA. So, with that, thank you all very much for watching. There will be more to come in the future. So until the next one, please take care.